After listening this morning's wonderful talk, I say that my work is a repetition. But anyway, I will present it because Darrell might be cast me out. No, he won't. I have this topic. As of now, as Darrell introduced me, I am a priest, Catholic priest, and at the same time, a philosophy professor. I'm teaching in two schools, one for candidate for priesthood, and the other is a normal school where I teach philosophy subjects. And at the same time, I am in charge now of being the director for migrants and seafarers of our, we call it Archdiocese of Davao. Presently, I'm assigned in a very interesting place. It's a very remote, rural, but beautiful paradise. We still have rivers there that is fresh and virgin. At least rivers are virgin. And our water there is still classified as Class AA, meaning it's really very clean and potable, and the people protect it. So I'm situated now in a very interesting place because it's mountainous, plenty still of, the ecosystem still very balanced. In fact, when I go out every night to say my rosary, to pray, I make sure that I really look down on the grounds because from time to time I meet snakes. And yeah, I love snakes, no? So I don't, I ask my staff not to kill them because, you know, the usual thing, they would kill a snake. So for me, I say they are part of the ecosystem. So I am like, I feel the spirit of Osama, no? And the other who are so in touch with nature, with Daniel there, my friend. So after listening all these talks this morning, so my lens is from the from a person who is engaged and experienced in many things. Migrant people, seafarers, with all their trials and troubles in life, and also with the poor people in my church. At the same time, students, so different angles. So I come up to this title, and as you know, priests are, we are man of, so to say, care, love, unity. And now also in the Philippines, the politics there is very interesting, very, very interesting. So politics is very interesting everywhere, as just like Bangladesh and anywhere in the world. So just this morning when I was listening with the talks here, so I got a memo from our Archbishop, our leader, church leader. We were reprimanded because this March 28 is the birthday of the former President Duterte. And you know, some priests are humans too, so many love this Duterte person, including me. But of course, I cannot declare that in public, no, because we are priests, no, and we welcome everybody regardless of your color or your ideology. That's priest. So we were told this morning, okay, don't say, you can say a mass, but do not mention don't add any more tension to the people. So I'm grateful to the guidance of the Archbishop. So this lens is having with that background, priest trying to be, or a man trying to be, to love life, bioethics. No? So the title is Irreplaceable Identities. So AI is AI, man is man, or human is human. It's a clear cut. Artificial intelligence as a conduit or an instrument of beneficence between worlds, the world of non-humans and human being. AI, ChatGPT, robotics, and other technology, this is a showcase of the unconcealing of human narrative, human ingenuity. We never stop learning. We continue to unfold as a person. This AI is a link. It enhances the world, serve better, it makes life better. It makes life convenient, nurtured, accessible, and connected. AI creators, the scientists, or the person, the technical persons, their intention is for the good life. The eudaimonia of Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher. Is AI neutral, value-free? I don't think so. It is not, because it is for the good, for people, as conduit for good. But we don't have anymore the freedom as regards to the users of AI, like ChatGPT. So I would say that AI gadgets or technologies have two ends. One is the good, the intent of the creators. The other, it's an open-ended intention. It depends upon the user. So there's a plurality of values, some good, some bad, some we don't know. It's a pluralism of values. So there's an inconvenient narrative, as presented again by my very able colleagues this morning. Intellectual depth versus peripheral. I'm talking especially in the academia because I noticed that some of my, that's why I anymore don't give assignments to my students. Why? Because I know it's coming from ChatGPT and their English is much better than mine. So it's a challenge for me to really read into their works and to censor it if it's really AI and it comes from really the original source, or just simply, of course, we know AI, anything that is database, then AI can just reconstruct it in the best way. So I go back to the old method in teaching. Okay, get a paper or make a reflection on this topic now and submit it now. No take-home assignment. So there's a challenge now in the academia as regards to the depthness of the students' output. Output authenticity, is it real or real? I mean, is it original? Or is it a theft or plagiarism? Authority, experts, scholars versus pseudo-expert scholars. Because when you really do your research, like our research, when we do it personally, we could even with closed eyes, we could articulate the content. Because it's our work, right? Especially if your mentors, Dr. Ryan here is one of my mentors when I was in Ateneo. So he really makes sure that my life would be really interesting academically. So he would give us some readings, which is good. But the millennials now especially, it's really interesting their life, no? So they could claim this thesis, beautiful thesis, but it's really their work. Who guess? Unifying versus scattering, misleading, confusing outputs. Empowering versus imprisoned or myopic. Progress versus destruction. Connectedness versus animosity. And after listening this morning, another anxieties come to my mind. AI and the military scientists, AI and the armaments, high-powered weapons. In the old days, we were afraid of nuclears, but there is biological warfare. AI and data privacy. How would we know? In the Philippines, for example, there's already centralized kind of databasing of our, let's say, our ID. But from time to time, we receive some messages from, okay, you won something, you won this lottery, so on and so forth. How is that? So, who gave these people the data, our, so to say, supposedly private numbers? And other anxieties or evils, which is out of hand of this AI, especially to the users. So there is a need for discourse, a necessity for discourse. Let's talk, let's sit down and talk like this one. So to bridge the gap, to answer anxieties, to level off the field, to discuss sensible principles of bioethics, for example, autonomy, justice, non-maleficence, beneficence. This is a good start. And to establish precautionary principles, to draw the social, environmental, cultural, ethical, legal parameters, to establish one global ethics, hopefully, as what happened to after the Second World War. People, state heads come to their senses, they come together, and overnight, they come up with a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Earth Charter, for example. So it's a byproduct of discourse like this one. So ABC and many roundtable discussions like what happened. So if I'm not mistaken, this is second to the series, because I think Darrell last time, no, our discussion also was AI in, I think it's in Thailand also, and as well as in Malaysia. So this is a wonderful platform. That's why I make, no matter how busy I am, I really make sure to come to these platforms like this, because it's where we can really listen to each other. Hopefully, with the UNESCO people and the people, the correct people to bring our message. Hopefully, there will be one global ethics as it is going on, as I listened to Sir this morning in behalf of UNESCO. And hopefully, this global ethics, just like the Earth Charter, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and other laws, universal laws, to secure an orderly, peaceful, progressive future generation. Because I understand, it seems that I'm referring especially to the Philippines. Philippines, as I've said, politics is very interesting nowadays. Why is that? Because of different opinions, different lenses. And if that will be the case, how much more in the global perspective? So who are involved in this discourse? Obviously, just like this one, all stakeholders. To talk about the cultural, moral, ethical, environmental, legal, pragmatic anxieties. And hopefully, with these platforms and our regional or our national dialogue like this one, hopefully, all these anxieties will be addressed, will be charted. So I really thank personally for American University of Sovereign Nations, because for how many classes we've been talking about these things, and many people, my classmates and professors who are here are so engaged, like Sukran, Sama, Suma, and other classmates. We have been talking about these things. And it's a wonderful platform. So thank you, AUSN. Thank you, Asian Bioethics Conference, UNESCO, among others. Because with these platforms, with these avenues, there is discourse happening. And with this discourse, there is a moral, ethical policy making. These are materials for policy making, hopefully in the future. We cannot just allow to make our future to be what? In apocalyptic manner. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Dexter. Time for any questions? Shamima, please.
Yes, Dexter, you have a nice presentation, wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And I have a question that is if I work on the and developed a article from the Chat GTP and then translate it in Bangla, in our mother language, then again translate it to English, then paraphrasing, it will be different type of article.
Yes.
Very standard one. Is it plagiarism?
As long as you cite the, it's not plagiarism if you cite the author. I think so. And if it's because there's a problem with citation in ChatGPT or in the internet. No, so you have to know really if it's really the real source. So if you cite the author, I think that's not plagiarism. It's just for me that is a perpetuity of, and also with your own idea, with your own inclusions in your own mind, in your own framework. That's not plagiarism. That is scholarly, so to say, copying. But you cite the author. The problem with, for example, I'm talking with my case. The problem with some of my students, they just take it as if their own. And you know, I've been teaching for decades, and I know their English, and I know their framework of mind. So how on earth they are able? Of course, I'm not insulting their capacity, but you know your students, right? So of course, I don't reprimand them in an aggressive way. So I would say, okay, so your work is nice, but next time you better cite the author or who write this one, because there's nothing new except that there are some developments on some ideas. So it's okay to rephrase for as long as you cite the person who wrote it.
Can we can the ChatGPT be author? Because the author is the ChatGPT.
I think you cannot. I think for example, when I do my thesis, for example, if I use the online sources or electronic, I cite it and the date when I access it and what's the what do you call that? What's the website that I cite? I think that's the way I do it. Or if the writer or the researcher is sure that the ChatGPT is citing the author of that subject matter, it can be done also that way. But I think in general, you cannot cite ChatGPT as a resource. I think so. That's so far I know. I don't know if there's any development. So I do it that way. I can cite it that I got it from the electronic, the website, and the date when I accessed it. For example, when I refer the Earth Charter, so I cite the Earth Charter dot blank, then on this date I cite it. That's electronic. Or somebody said it, like for example, Osama said it, and I would refer him, the person, as the author who really said it. So I think that's the scholarly way to cite things, but not, you should say, according to ChatGPT, no, you cannot do that in school.
Okay, Osama, briefly.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. Can we go back to the slide that was on the screen? just to, yeah, I just want to.
This one?
No, the last one. It was related to the idea of creating a global ethics. So I really like that point because I'm on the same thinking as you are on this. There, yeah. Okay, so going back to Aristotle and Plato and fast forwarding through people like Kant and you know others, John Rawls comes to my mind, Bentham, all the way to today, we can see that there is no agreement on ethics. Yeah. However, there is agreement, a kindergarten type agreement on certain principles that basically says we should do good to reduce harm throughout the world. So it would be nice to have, you know, those things that we agree upon and basically put them in practice, not only at the policy level but all the way down to the ground, yeah? So make them grounded in society. So I'm wondering, in your context, and I'm a believer in context, yeah, because I've seen what happens if you don't look at the context. You're not culturally sensitive, you get rejected. So how do you then marry those principles that we all agree upon to do good, to avoid harm or to reduce harm and cruelty and unusual acts, but bring them down to the level of public intelligence, let's call it that way, because nobody is born stupid. Everybody has some kind of intelligence. Nobody is born lazy. Everybody, I mean, look at a baby. They immediately want to move. Okay. So nobody's stupid, really, in my opinion, and nobody is lazy. So everybody has some intelligence. But intelligence doesn't mean you're always going to use it to do good. You can be intelligent and do good things, but you can be intelligent and do bad things. So now we're talking about global ethics and only the good. So how do we bring that to development that can actually evolve independent of people's intelligence? Because again, intelligence is tricky, yeah? It can be used for good or for bad. And if you look at the history of development, it has always moved independently of people's intelligence. And now we're saying global ethics. To me, that means you know, bring it to the level of the intelligence of that particular culture, but make sure that it's good. I wonder if you know.
Thank you, Sama. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. It's a challenge. No, going back to when I make research on that the Common Earth Principle, the Earth Charter. The good thing with the Earth Charter is a global principle. It's a global ethics. Common Earth Principle, land for the landless. The earth is for everybody. It's a good principle, global ethics. However, the challenge is that, as being cited also by that paper, it remains a soft law. It remains a moral prescription. It depends upon the leader. It depends the state. It depends to the authority, let's say president. Now, the problem with that president, if that president he knows what's right, what's supposed to do, but since it's simply a moral prescription, so if he has a different agenda. So leadership matters, I think, Osama. Leadership matters. If leaders are kind of sinister in their agenda, that's a problem. Just like what's going on around the world. Politics and politicians, these are two different things. There are wonderful laws in a country. For example, in the Philippines, there are wonderful laws, but there's more challenge to the leaders, to the politicians. Now, even if this global ethics is a soft law and becomes a hard law, it becomes really a law that has really a teeth to be. Those who don't follow it should be penalized. Even if but if the leaders, if the implementers, if the authority are some sort of have different agendas, so this is still a problem. So applying that to laws should really fall into the hands of good people. So to say, how do we define good? Well, common good. No? What's really good for me and good for the people? That's why discourse is important, because sometimes some good people, even good leaders, could be good, but their good might not be the common good. So it's need a discourse. We need a discourse. We need to talk to a level of the ground, or else you could do your own thing, which is also good. Could do my own thing, which is also good. But that's pluralism. Mind your own business and mind my own business. That's a problem. So we need to talk. So we need to lay down things, or else we would be on separate ways. Just like what's happening now in Philippines. There's a cultural divide between the North and the South. I thought it's gone, but it's recurring now because of the political challenge of our country. So we need to sit down again, because there are a lot of issues we need to talk together, and both have points. But who's the loser at the end of the day? Those who have the power, the poor.
Thank you so much for being a conduit of beneficence. Thank you.